Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Hello, everyone. This is Roberta Grimes, and of course, this is Seek Reality, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. I'm very glad you could join us. You know, we're told by those that we used to think were dead that we carefully plan our lives on Earth with the help of our primary guides for this lifetime, and also with others who will be important in it, like, you know, people who will be our parents this time around, our children, spouses, friends, and their guides, too. So think of it, the way I imagine it is it's a happy crowd busily working around a big table that's spread with plants and sit out under the trees in the pure white light of love, which is all that exists in the afterlife levels. We still have our vast eternal minds, so we are still able to think, you know, a lot more positively than we can think when we're here. And we're ribbing one another about the fact that someone who is our wonderful, close, eternal friend is going to be an enemy in this next life, doing that as a favor to us to help us grow spiritually. That's why we come here. We're desperate, all of us, to grow spiritually. And pushing back against negativity and choosing love instead always is how we grow, basically, here. A little more complicated than that, but not a lot. So we want all that negative stuff to happen. I know how it works. But I have to admit that sometimes even I have to question whether some of the things that happen to people really could have been planned that way. Then I meet someone like our guest today, someone who loves and blesses the very people who have caused him the most pain, precisely because what they did so powerfully helped him to grow. Patrick J. McKallick is a survivor, and he has used what he learned in the difficult first part of his life to build a career in teaching and helping other people. He's a cognitive behavioral counselor. I don't even understand some of this stuff, but it sounds so fancy. He's a certified neurofeedback provider and a consultant and trainer internationally. He has worked as a clinician with alcohol and other drug addictions, EEG neurotherapy treatment, which apparently also helps ADD, PTSD, and other anxiety disorders. He's conducted extensive training events regarding neurofeedback for psychologists, psychiatrists, and other licensed counselors in the U.S. in the areas of alcohol and drug abuse. Organizational, all his personal journey. Patrick, welcome. I'm so glad you're finally here with us.
Thank you, Roberta. I sure do appreciate it. This is going to be fun, I think, as you said.
Well, let's begin by just talking about your the first part of your life, which to me is a very important aspect of your life. I mean, when I started reading this book, I thought it was easily going to be, you know, we could talk about this in an hour. We can't. The first part, I should just say, his book is called The Face of the Iguana, and the subtitle is amazing. It's Freedom from Toxic Beliefs, A Journey in Healing and Transformation, and that's just what it is. The first half of his book is about something which I have never imagined, several kinds of things I've never imagined, primarily what it's like to be part of a cult and how to get free of a cult. We've never had anyone expert on a cult on this program, and I really want to talk about all of that because I think it's useful to all of us. But the second part of The Face of the Iguana, and there's a big face of an iguana on the cover with a butterfly in its nose, which I think is kind of a summary of the kinds of things that you talk about. But the second half of the book is so much spiritual learning and education that we're going to have him back a second time to talk about that. So we have time enough to really get into the first part of your life, which frankly is kind of exotic. He had an American mother, and yet you seem to have belonged to a fairly wealthy Mexican family, and your father was a drug. Please tell a little bit about the early part of your life, which really was traumatic almost from the start.
Yes, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, alcoholic father who was abusive, not only to us as children, but to my mother. And we grew up in Mexico, so it was an environment in which facilitated and promoted alcohol and alcohol use. So it was a very disturbing part of my life in the sense that although I felt that my dad loved me and he did show ways that he did want to take care of me, at the same time his alcoholism got the best of him. I was sent to boarding schools. I was eventually sent to an orphanage because my father could no longer take care of me. So it was trial
your parents
after
had
trial.
divorced, though. Your parents had divorced, right? Before you, then they just packed you off to an orphanage because you were so ungovernable, and you were like 10. How old were you when they put you in an orphanage? So unbelievable.
I was about 10 years old, 10, 11
Lord.
approximately.
Lord.
And it was just one of those things. Well, what do we do with him? My father was not available because of his drinking. And so we'll just throw them in here in this orphanage because they knew the priest, and the priest was a foreigner, and he was able to take me in. And it was really quite a shock to my system. As I look back at all of, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I think you write very well. This is a very horrifying in some places, but still always a very entertaining book. And in places, it's really funny. You almost laugh out loud. But it's still, the facts of it are terrible. This was happening in northern Mexico. His mother was divorced by his father, and she went back to the U.S. She was an American. So they put him into this orphanage where he got minimal food. He wasn't allowed to see his grandparents, whom he adored, or his father, except very seldom. And they beat you. I mean, they literally beat you. I just find that I don't think it could have happened in the U.S., but maybe I'm naive. Still, it did happen to you.
Well, it did. And at the time, I don't know where I got the strength. Well, I do know where I got the strength now to go through the whole experience. It was an experience that was totally transforming to my whole being, my whole soul. It allowed me to grow to such a degree that I became more and more sensitive, not only spiritually but intuitively at the same time. And we never realized at the time that when we're going through bad experiences, that there is another presence working through us to make us blossom and become a better person and to evolve. If you would have asked me 3, 4, or 5 generations, or rather decades ago, whether or not I really enjoyed this, I would have told you, you got to be crazy. How could I enjoy all of this?
No, I don't see how you could have enjoyed it. Yes, but then you got to the point where this priest who was running this orphanage, and a lot of the kids were off the streets. They really were orphans. You were not. You were just someone had been put there because they didn't know what else to do with you. But you came to the point where you were thinking, if there was justice, he will be anointed a saint. Now, that is a transformation. It's hard for me to imagine, but you really feel that way.
Well, because I could see that he was just a very caring, loving person, and maybe his vision was obscured by all the Catholic dogma and religiosity that comes with it, the whole package. And so at the same time, I could see he really did care, even though I was not really exactly very happy there.
No,
I could still see that he had the love that it takes, and in certain cases, and in certain aspects, rather, I would say that he had unconditional love.
Yeah.
So as I look back on it, I'm grateful to him. I'm grateful to my parents because they were my teachers, and I think this was pre-selected prior to me coming into this lifetime. As a matter of fact, I don't believe it. I know it.
And so what do you do when you're in this horrible situation and the food has weevils in it that you've got to pick out before you can eat the beans? I mean, and it's just so terrible. So what do? You decide you have a vocation and you enter a seminary when you're like, what, 12?
Approximately 12, yes.
Gee, I thought, oh my heavens, frying pan to the fire, why don't we? Gee.
Yes, and I knew that was, I felt I did have a vocation, but at the same time, that was my way out of the orphanage. And so I took advantage of that. I'm going to be very honest about it. But I thought, well, really, maybe there is something here. And after I'd gone through so much, I figured, well, there's got to be something here that I can take advantage of. Not knowing that once I was in the seminary, I would be exposed to a ton of fear-based belief systems and hell and damnation and if you don't do this right, you're going to go to hell and all that stuff. And I go, wait a minute, this is worse than when I was in the orphanage.
Yes.
It was the beginning of a whole series of exposures to what people can do when they propagate fear-based ideas. And how, if we're so vulnerable, especially having gone through what I went through, I was very vulnerable. And so when I finally got out of college, I was searching for answers. I was wanting to know, well, what's this all about? Why am I here? I was still also hurting from the alcoholism that my father imposed upon me and upon my sisters. I was suffering. I was in need of help. But then this cult came around, and there I got absorbed not only into.
Let's stay with a little bit with the seminary, because I didn't know they would put people in a seminary when they were so young. That someone who thought he wanted to be a priest, they'd let him in at 12, but they did. Apparently, that was common.
In Mexico, yes, it's common. We were recruited young.
Wow.
Let me just put it that way.
I can see that. But the food was better. That's, that was a step up. Fewer weevils, I guess. And
yes, there was an improvement in that area. I can say that, yes.
But you even went and explored the crypt beneath the church, and that's an amazing story all by itself, the things you saw in that crypt and what happened to you there. I mean, this is I cannot imagine a child going through some of the things that you went through in your life, and you tell the story somewhat matter-of-factly, but I can see that you were building up fears. Let's talk about what the iguana reference is, because I think that's very interesting. I mean, the face of the iguana, he talks about it, and then we come to understand what it is. Explain it, please, Patrick.
Yes, that's a very good question. The iguana represents the limbic brain, or the emotional brain. It's also referred to as the primitive brain, and also as the reptilian brain. So actually, the iguana represents that part of our brain where the fight-flight response comes from, and where we are alerted when danger, either real or imagined, is upon us or coming upon us. So the amygdala is that part of the brain that sounds off the bells and whistles that you're in danger and you better take cover. And so the amygdala then is alerted whether it's real or imagined. And of course, going through all of these experiences during my childhood and subsequently in the seminary and the cult, my brain, the reptilian brain, the amygdala, was so well trained. It was just prime to be touched and to be alerted. And so it was like a buildup of fear and more fear and more fear and more fear, and to the point where it caused some serious issues mentally and emotionally.
So what this core sort of reptilian part of the brain does really is sort of fight or flight, kind of fear, and makes you react to fear. This is something new to me, and I think it's very interesting because, of course, the whole point of our being here is to learn to avoid fear and turn away from fear and embrace love. That's why we are in these bodies in the first place. So you're saying, though, that by having these experiences, you really engaged and empowered that part of your brain. And that was part of what you then had to fight. I mean, he was literally fighting. That he could see the iguana, and he was afraid it would get him in the end, which I thought was kind of horrifying and fascinating, because remember how young you were.
Right. Roberta, I finally learned to embrace the fear. I just gave up, so, all right.
Spanish was your language then, right? Yeah.
Spanish was my native tongue, and I spoke English with a very broken accent. And when I was sent off to the States, finally, I was able to, perfect my English. But getting back to the fear piece, I had to learn to embrace the fear, because fighting it was not going to help it.
Yeah.
I don't know who said, whatever you fight strengthens, what you resist persists. I believe it was Eckhart Tolle who said that.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly true. If you fight the fear, it's just going to come after you. You enlarge it, you magnify it. It becomes so much a part of the monster that's going to come out from underneath your bed and grab you and haul you off. And that's just, it doesn't work when you don't embrace your fears. Then it's a repetitive process that keeps reinforcing.
Way of thinking or something. How old were you, and how did they recruit you? Where were you? What were you doing?
From the orphanage, I would go downtown to the church. Actually, it was a cathedral, and I was listening to some of the priests that were doing recruitment for the seminary, and so I thought, this is an excellent idea. Why don't I just go ahead and see if I can join? And I made some contacts, and then I told the priest, that the head of the orphanage, I said, I think I have a vocation. I really do want to pursue this. Would you allow me to go to orientations? And I did. I went to orientations, and I thought, this is so much better than where I was in. I have to go and just spring for it and go for it, and I did.
But then you were turned off by all the fear-based teachings, which I don't at all. That doesn't surprise me at all. We talk about that here, but and you went to this high school, and it all turned out well. But then you ended up in the cult. How old were you? What were you doing? And what first attracted you to this different belief system?
Well, I had a very good job working in the juvenile justice system at the time. And I still had all of the unresolved issues from my childhood, the pain, the fear, the agony, the sense of abandonment, because I was abandoned not only by my mother, who fled because she got her divorce. And, of course, she didn't mean to abandon me, but she had no choice because my father would not permit me to go with her. But I was also abandoned in the orphanage. So I had all these issues going on. And when I found out when 3 or 4 years after I graduated from college, I happened upon this organization, and it sounded so good. And, oh, wow, now I'm going to get all of the answers that I was missing that I didn't get before. And so I was just trapped completely. And I guess more, not trapped, but hypnotized. I was seduced. I was allowed to just fold my entire being right into the whole narrative of this cult that had no intention of doing any good for me mentally, physically, emotionally.
So what were they saying to you that made you say, "Oh, that sounds good"? Because this was voluntary. You did it yourself. So why?
That's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that, Roberta, because this is how cults work. They work to make you feel like you are special. In other words, they appeal to my ego. You know, you just didn't come upon us accidentally. You were chosen by the mighty cosmic beings to be here. And of course, that alerts the ego. I go, oh, wow, I'm special. I'm special. I'm more special than anybody else. I better listen to what they're trying to tell me. And then they continued with that narrative and appealed more and more to how wonderful this is. And you know, not very many people are allowed to come into this organization, and you happen to be one of the chosen ones. And so we want to congratulate you for being here. And then that's what had happened. That's when it happened. The drawbridge came down. I walked across the bridge, and the bridge came up, and there was no leaving. And then that's when the fear-based belief systems really started, to the point where I was having serious emotional breakdowns, panic attacks, anxiety disorders were just rampant. And not just from me. It was also the other cult members as well. And I noticed also a peculiar pattern that appeared here, and that was most of the cult members that are my cult mates, they had issues as well. They had gone through traumas. They had suffered as children or even as young adults. And they were there to seek relief, healing, some resolution to all of those issues, and only to find a mire of fear and anxiety and you name it. There were people that were in the cult that committed suicide because they were driven to the point where they just felt that there was no way out. And
but what they were doing was making you. They were making you feel insecure about yourself and feel that that was the only place you could be where you could have access to whatever you needed. Or I mean, it seems that it subtly changed from you're special to you need to be here. What did they tell you that made you think I must stay here?
Well, at first, of course, it was appealing to the ego. You're so special. You're handpicked and chosen specifically to come to us because we are the repository of truth, and we represent all of the cosmos and the truth of the cosmos and of light,
oh, my word.
So on and so forth.
Oh.
And so you can't find it anywhere else but here. And then when you started perhaps to doubt, then they would come, if you try to leave, your karma will be so huge that you will go through the second death. Your soul will dissolve, and you will never, you will just be nothing when you, and this is what I actually believed, or though in my cult mates as well. It was just like, if I leave or if I dare to leave, it's all over for me. So they not only kept me there, they took advantage of my resources, my personal resources, my mental resources. They wiped out my savings account. I was completely, in a sense, totally tied to them and to their belief systems. And it just got to the point where I said, you know what? I don't care what happens. The God that I want to believe in is not the God that does what it does by expressing himself or herself through this organization. And then I started remembering all of the fear-based belief systems that I was taught as in the seminary as a Catholic growing up. And the devil and hell, and if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. And so I go, wait a minute, hold on here. There's a pattern going on that this is not right. And it wasn't until later, after all of the years that I had passed, that I said to myself, I don't care what happens. I know God wants me to be happy. He wants me to be successful, and based on that, I'm going to leave. And
so you went in there when you were in your mid-20s, right? You were that age. How old were you when? How long did it take you to leave? It was like 18 months, right? I think.
About 18 months, approximately. And as I describe in the book, it's quite an adventure.
Yes,
it's kind of like a suspense story. I've been told the book is a page turner.
It is, and it's a fun book. You wouldn't think a book about when you have had these horrible things happen to you would be fun, but this one kind of is. You make it light as you can imagine, I read a lot of books that that are tragic or have tragic stories that have a happy ending, but yours is sort of interesting and different and entertaining in a light way, even though it's got heavy stuff in it. But yeah,
yes, I'm sorry.
I just want to say to people who are listening, the accounts of being in the cult are horrifying. And totally believable. I had never understood how cults could prey on people's minds as they do, but you're right. I mean, I can see how that's possible with the way these people sort of kept you off balance and kept you afraid that if you made any changes or if you displeased them, you'd have horrible personal consequences. That's horrifying. It really is.
It's terrorism at its best.
Oh, or worse. Or
worse, yes. It was like being in a concentration camp during World War II, if not worse than that in some respects. Well, nothing could be worse than being in a concentration camp, but it certainly has its similarities in terms of anxiety and dread. And you know what kept me alive, what kept me afloat were the wonderful memories that I had of my grandmother, the fun things that I did. Yes. I did have some good parts of my childhood.
Yeah, I love the stories about her. She was really a piece of work, wasn't she?
Yes, she sure was. And so it was actually, she was one of the persons, and she knows that now since she's in spirit. She was instrumental in getting me out of that cult because, and I'm convinced that her soul inspired me to actually use her as an excuse for me to leave the cult.
Yes.
What I discovered was that the cult leaders, the cult leader in itself, and I don't identify the cult leader either being a female or a male. I don't identify the organization because I don't want to give it any energy. But I do want to say this. One of their main advantages of having all these people under their power and control was, bottom line, money and more money and more money. And money breeds power and breeds control. And the more that they could recruit, the more people that they could recruit, the more that they could bring in, then they could live a life of luxury. And that's exactly, when I caught on to that, I said, okay, that's my way out. And so I told them, my grandmother's going to divide up her estate, and there's millions of dollars involved here. I think I need to go back to Mexico and claim that, because she said, I have to be there unless I'm there. I'm not going to get it. Oh, no, you go ahead. You just go right ahead.
Bring it back.
Yeah, and just keep reporting back to us. Call us, collect. And it was just like, oh, I'm on to you. I am really on to you.
Right. Oh, my.
And that's how I was able to escape. Now, it was not that easy. There were a lot of intrigue going on with this process of breaking up and breaking away from all of this. There were people in the cult that saw through that and said, yeah, I don't believe you, and I don't think that you're doing the right thing, so on and so forth. But I was able to finally manage to do it.
Now, could you just, because people are saying I could never fall for that. I should say I happen to know Patrick personally, and he's a very bright man. And so it is possible probably for just about anyone who is maybe feeling a little insecure, young. I mean, to be in your 20s, you're insecure by definition. How would people recognize that what they think is a spiritual, organization that's attracting them? How would they recognize the signs of a cult? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. It's when the cult leader says this is the only way that you're going to find happiness or a spiritual awakening or realization. When the cult leader says, throw yourself at my feet and adore me because I am the repository of wisdom and love. I am the envoy of the universe, of the all that is, so on and so forth. But that's not all, Roberta. The other issue, as a neurotherapist and having worked with brainwave neurofeedback, one of the issues that they did was they had us chant, and we chanted for hours and hours before the cult leader would get up there and give these messages from the cosmic beings, so on and so forth. And what I found out later in my studies as a neurotherapist was actually they were sending our brains down into the theta level. That's 4 to 7 hertz. And what they were doing is they were opening up our subconscious mind. And basically that's the hypnagogic state where a hypnotherapist would take you down to that level and be able to do hypnotherapy with you. Well, what they were doing was they were programming us to accept all of these ideas from these quote-unquote cosmic beings. And so we became hypnotized in a very true sense of the word. It was going down from a scientific level to a level that we know today is the way of going into the subconscious mind.
Wow.
Once you go through that portal, then you are basically hooked, and you have all of this programming downloaded into your subconscious mind. And I'm telling you, go ahead.
What advice do you have for people who are saying, "Oh, I recognize that in me," or "I recognize that in a loved one"? And especially people who have fear-based programming, because that seems to have been the background in this for you. What do you recommend they do?
Well, first of all, I would recommend that they advise, and we're talking about family members, for example, that might be involved in a cult or trying to get involved in a cult.
Or it may even be themselves. Oh, I just realized this thing that I'm getting attracted to maybe isn't good for me.
Well, I think Krishnamurti said it very, very, very well in his book, Freedom from the Known. There are no authorities. There are no individuals. There are no gurus. There is no one out there who can offer us a comfortable spiritual life. There is only you and your relationship with the world and with the people that you are in this world with. And when you surrender to an authority, then you surrender your whole being to that authority. And there is no one single authority that can give us the truth. The truth is everywhere. And truth does not rely is specifically on any type of dogma or documents or any type of information. Dogma only serves to bring rules and regulations and reinforce authority over us. So,
okay, I have a question for you now, which probably you are the only person who really could answer this question, because you have had all these experiences. Is the Catholic Church a cult?
In my opinion, yes, absolutely. However, it doesn't have the stricter cult aspects like what you would find in a New Age cult. There's several New Age cults going on right now. There are religions right now that I would consider cultish, just based on their belief systems, which are fear-based. I think the primary element of any fear-based belief systems or cults or religions is fear and how we can have power and control over you through that fear. Fear cannot come from all that is, from the source, from our Creator.
Because our Creator is only love. Yes, exactly right.
Total unconditional love. And that reminds me of a meme I saw recently of an old Eskimo, and he's talking to a priest, and the Eskimo says, "If I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell?" And the priest says, "No, not if you did not know." Then the Eskimo says, "Then why did you tell me?"
Oh, gee. So true.
And so it's exactly what we're talking about here. The belief systems try to make God a anthropomorphic being, just like us, with all the hate and all the prejudices. And you know what? That's not what it's all about.
No.
You finally get to the point where you realize, no, God is pure unconditional love, and there is nothing other than pure unconditional love.
Yes.
And I can't drive that message home more clearly. I just, sometimes when I pass by churches that say, "Oh, this is the church of good news," and I go in there and they're talking about the devil and how you're going to go to hell and all that. I'm sorry. That you were saying about good news, this is not good news.
Not at all.
This is all fear, and this is bad news. I wouldn't want to be a part of you. But people get seduced, they get hypnotized, they get programmed, and it's this societal, religious-based programming that is so pernicious. It's so devastating to people's welfare, their minds, their souls. It's got to stop. There's terrorism in our pulpits. And until people say no, and until people say, "Listen, enough is enough. I'm not going to listen to this because this is not what God is all about." Source, God cannot be described. God is neither he or she. God is isness. It's beingness. It's pure unconditional love. And we are sparks of the divine.
We have to say also, and this is something extraordinary about you, every one of these people who harmed you, even this cult leader, you were able to process those experiences once you got out and to forgive everything that had happened, everything this person had done, right?
That's correct.
Just reading how you went through the forgiveness, to me, that was worth the book. Reading how you were able to take what was really a horrific experience and be grateful to the person who inflicted it on you because of the growth that came out of it. What an extraordinary lesson that is.
Yes, exactly. And I took the book, when the book came out, Roberta, last summer, I took the book in my hands, and when I came home, I talked to the cult leader who was in spirit at this time, and I said, "Thank you for teaching me. Thank you, because this is the product of what you have taught me." And I thanked my father, too, and I said, "Thank you," and I thanked everybody who ever hurt me or injured me. And I think forgiveness is the greatest love that we can have.
Yes.
And we have to learn to forgive. And that's not always easy. That's challenging at times. But when you finally realize that forgiveness is the doorway to unconditional love and liberation, then you're going to walk through it. And I hope if anybody can at least take something away from this interview, and it's that forgiveness is the seed of love. And if we can just allow our forgiveness to go out to everyone who has hurt us, then we have done our job. And I think we have to mean that. We have to say, "Listen, I didn't particularly agree with what you did to me. However, I forgive you, and I love unconditionally."
That's right.
The divine
love.
Spark that is within you.
You don't just forgive. People can forgive and still hold kind of a grudge. I forgive you, but but you actually embrace and love these people. You give them the gift of your emotional support, of your love, of your kindness. There's a saying, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that crushes it. I think it was Mark Twain who said that. But that's what you do. You do it in real life. And one of the reasons that we're going to have you back, I think the big reason, is that you have put all of this together so well in the second part of your book. I think you can be a great teacher of all of this, because you certainly learned it the hard way. But let's talk a little bit about that next stage that we'll be talking about in about a month or two, as soon as we can fit you in. What do you want people to know about that? What are you going to be able to help us know?
Well, having PTSD at different levels of my life, especially earlier in my life after I left the cult, and less later on, I did discover that finally, after I had a spiritually transformative experience. First of all, there was I'll talk about in our next interview. It was an experience that could be equivalent to what would a near-death experience would be like. I didn't have a near-death experience, but it certainly was spiritually totally transforming. But then that gave me the permission to take risks and go out of my comfort zone and do the research that finally collapsed all of the PTSD, all of my fear of death. It collapsed all of the fear-based belief systems. And that was the afterlife research that is evidential and that we have available to us.
Yes, it's easy now. Yes.
It collapsed everything, Roberta, that I feared. It just completely transformed me. And if anybody can just take a risk and take a look, and I believe that taking a risk means that the research has to be evidential. It can't be just somebody just imagining things. Evidential research means that it has to abide by certain amounts of scientific evidence. And those were my conditions for going out and doing this research. If it wasn't evidential, if it wasn't scientific, I wasn't going to listen to it, because I wasn't going to make the same mistake again going into another cult. Oh, yes.
Yeah, but it's easy now. I mean, it took me almost 50 years to get to where I really knew what I know now. But yeah, anyone can do it within a couple of years if you just read the right things and study the right things. It's so easy now, which I'm so very glad about, because as you're absolutely right. When you really get that your life is eternal, it collapses all your fears. Well, this has been wonderful. I am looking forward so much to being able to talk about the second half of this really terrific book. It's called The Face of the Iguana, Freedom from Toxic Beliefs, which is fear-based beliefs, a journey in healing and transformation. Patrick, do you have a website?
There is a website on Facebook, The Face of the Iguana, and there's also another website that people can join, and that is Freedom from Fear-Based Belief Systems. That's also on Facebook. So I can be contacted through either of those two websites on Facebook. I'm in the process of creating my own website. However, that's a work in progress as we speak.
Yes, well, that's wonderful. And you teach people, right? Do you help people to develop the knowledge that you have if they come to you with their questions?
Sure, absolutely. You bet. As best I can.
This is wonderful. Our guest has been Patrick J. McKallick, The Face of the Iguana, a terrific book. The first part is, as I say, rather entertaining. It's a story of his life, which has been horrific. And how you can make that entertaining, I'm not sure. He's a very good writer. But the second half we're going to be talking about in a month or two, and I think you'll find it extraordinary. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I am so glad you could be with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you really get what that means, it's going to change everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be what I think is the biggest young wonderkind in this field, the amazing Cyrus Kirkpatrick. I think this is his third time with us. Cyrus's recent book is The Afterlife and Beyond, an examination of life after death by an out-of-body explorer. Cyrus, who's very young, he's amazingly young, he's a fearless explorer of all sorts of afterlife-related phenomena. He's a world traveler, and he's becoming one of the world's leading experts on out-of-body travel, even at his very young age, because he's so fearless about it and so curious. He's going to be speaking with us next week from literally the other side of the world, and I know you're going to love him as I love him. Everybody who knows him loves this young man. Please be sure to join us next week. Our guest this week has been Patrick J. McKallick. Patrick is someone that I know personally, and I love it when I get to meet people who either are listeners or especially people who, are going to be guests. He's a very bright, wise man. About my age, actually, I think, Patrick, you are. And he's funny. He's relatable. His experiences have been harrowing, but what a triumph his life has been over all of that pain. His book is The Face of the Iguana, Freedom from Toxic Beliefs, A Journey in Healing and Transformation. I think it's an important read for anyone who's dealing with after effects of a traumatic childhood, or really with the after effects of any very traumatic set of life events. To see how he put his life together when it was such a mess after a horrible childhood and his depersonalization in that cult. And now he has become someone who has a powerful personal center, a really good man, and he's devoting his life now to helping others. I think his story is an inspiration. As you know, my nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity with Jesus that Jesus taught is soon going to be out. And for young children, there's The Fun of Meeting Jesus. You can order all these books through bookstores or on Amazon.com. And of course, the adult books are available as audiobooks as well. I love it when people email me. I know that sounds silly because sometimes I spend all day answering emails, but when you reach out to me with a question or a comment, if you want to talk about my books, if you want to talk about something I've said, or if you just have something that's bothering you, you can always reach me through RobertaGrimes.com. There's a contact block there. It can take a few days, so please be patient, but as long as you give me your right email address, you will hear back from me. Past episodes of Seek Reality are available on webtalkradio.net, on realrevolutionradio.com, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and a number of other stations too, including those in the wonderful Dream Vision 7 radio family. More and more people are telling me that they just listen through the Seek Reality app that you can find for free in the iTunes App Store. Now, I don't use apps, so I think that's very advanced of them. And if you ever wonder where Seek Reality can be heard right now, just go to Roberta and click on the radio tab. If you enjoy our weekly conversations, you might also want to check out my blog sometime at RobertaGrimes.com. I use those blog posts to work through some of the issues we talk about here on Seek Reality, and I'm amazed to say that now some people tell me they wait for my new post each Sunday morning. Oh, the pressure. What if I don't do it one week? I will try to do it every week, but again, if you're interested, please come and check that out. If you sign up on my website, you'll get it automatically. As you know, my role in your life is just to ease your path. I want you to learn in just a few years' time what it has taken me all this time to learn, almost 50 years literally. I'm still learning. But I want it to be easy for you and enjoyable for you. And when you really get it, you will know that you are an indestructible, eternal, perfectly loved being. You are more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. And when you understand that, you will be able to grow spiritually, just as Patrick has, into the perfectly divine being that you already are. You just have forgotten it. You are that eternally. Meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and please make the most of this coming week in our one reality, knowing that you in particular are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all, are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at RobertaGrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.